interview right now.
We now welcome to the program the great Al Yellon, managing editor of Cubs site Bleed Cubbie Blue. Al, thanks for being on today.
Thanks for having me.
So, Al, the first thing we're going to kick off with some teams that don't really matter that much in this division. We'll start off with the Cincinnati Reds. They're not going to be contender this year. Joey Votto, he's still a very good player. What does he do differently that other players just can't seem to?
Well, one of the things that Votto does really well is draw walks. So, pitchers have to work him carefully. And if they get pitches in the zone, he's going to hit them hard. So, the Reds could have traded him, I suppose, saved a lot of money, but they need to have some decent players on that team. Votto's under contract for a long time. So, that much is worth it for Reds fans to watch, but there really isn't much else to be excited about for that team.
Right. And pretty much can say the same thing about the Milwaukee Brewers. Unfortunately for their fans, of course, they're another team. They don't have a whole lot of chance of making the playoffs, especially in that division. What positives do you think the Brewers fans can get from this year?
Well, they got some young pitchers who look pretty good. Taylor Jungmann, who came into the Brewers at the end of last year, looks like a pretty good young pitcher. So, their offense is not going to be great. They traded away some of their offensive stars last year. Carlos Gomez is gone. Chris Davis is gone. So it's really kind of Ryan Braun and the Eight Musketeers. So they're not going to score a lot of runs, but their pitching might be decent enough to keep some of their games close.
So we'll move on to the three teams that won north of 140 games last year. At least that's what it felt like. Far and away, really the best division in a long time in baseball. And we'll start with the Pittsburgh Pirates. Of course, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and the Cubs all were very good last season. What should Cubs fans fear most about the Pirates?
Well, the Pirates obviously, center their offense around Andrew McCutchen, who's one of the best players in the game. He's an MVP candidate every year. They've lost a couple of guys from their offense from last year. Pedro Alvarez was never a great hitter, but does hit some home runs. So they'll miss a little bit of that. They'll miss Neil Walker at second base. But they've still got some very good other players at other positions. They'll get Jung-Ho Kang back from that leg injury he suffered last year. Josh Harrison is a good hitter. Gregory Polanco is a very good young hitter who will only get better. So that offense is pretty strong. On the other hand, the bottom of the Pirates pitching staff is going to be something to watch out for. You've got obviously Garrett Cole, who is one of the better pitchers in the league. Francisco Liriano is a solid rotation piece, but they let J.A. Happ go, and they let Charlie Morton go, so they're going to try and resurrect the carcass of Ryan Vogelsong, see if he's any good. They got John Neese from the Mets in the Neil Walker trade. So the bottom of the Pirates' rotation is going to be maybe a little bit iffy. On the other hand, their bullpen is very good. So if those guys can get, if the starters can get into the seventh inning, I think that the Pirates are going to win a lot of games again.
Yeah, I think Pedro Alvarez ended up going to the Orioles. So the Orioles, who are, of course, not in this division, seem like they either want to hit a home run or strike out at this point.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
But what do the Pirates do that other medium market teams, maybe even small market teams at this point, might be able to do to be successful, just to mimic the Pirates?
It took them a long time. They were 20 years without a winning record, and they had some management teams in there that weren't really that good at drafting. They made a lot of number one draft picks that just didn't work out at all. But, then they started picking guys like Walker and McCutchen, and they started building an organization, kind of the way the Cubs have done it. And they had some real good luck with free agent signings like Francisco Liriano. They made a trade. They let Russell Martin go with their free agency, but they made a trade and got Francisco Cervelli, who turned out to be really good behind the plate. So, now they have a management team in place that seems to know what they're doing. Clint Hurdle's a pretty good manager, so I kind of compare them in that way to the Royals, what the Royals have done, and in producing a lot of good young players from their system. It takes time, obviously, and you have to have the right people in place. But the Pirates are obviously doing it in a small market, and they're successful. The fans have come back in big numbers.
I want to remind our listeners we're with Al Yellon of Bleed Cubbie Blue. We're going to move on to my second favorite team in all of baseball behind the Tigers, the team which has won the division for 37 years in a row, it seems like, the Cardinals. They lost the Cardinals to the Cubs, of course, and we'll talk about the effect on that team later, but they're projected by Pacoda to not even make the playoffs this time. Is this the year the Cardinals finally fall back to the pack?
I could see that. In many ways, the Cardinals were very lucky last year with all the injuries they had, especially their pitching staff, and they still managed to win 100 games. On the other hand, the Cubs and Pirates played much better than the Cardinals did in the second half. So Cardinals ran out to a big early lead and kind of coasted into that 100-win season. They obviously lost Jason Hayward and Don Lackey to the Cubs, and Cardinal fans are not real happy about that. I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yes.
It's not just that Hayward and Lackey left as free agents; it's that they went to the Cubs.
Right.
So that's a double whammy there. They've had some injury issues. You know that Johnny Peralta is now out for a couple of months. That's not going to be easy for them to replace. Matt Holliday's getting older and just never seems to be 100% healthy. We don't know whether Yadier Molina is going to make it to opening day. Obviously, Adam Wainwright returning is going to be a big deal for them if he's the old Adam Wainwright. And then we'll see how it works. I don't want to come around and say the Cardinals are going to miss the playoffs, but it will be tougher for them this year than in past years.
And they always, and we've talked about it endlessly on the show, they always seem to, it doesn't matter who's injured, they can almost not field a team and win 90. It's bizarre how they do that.
That's
what
it seemed like, but maybe this is the year that kind of thing stops.
Yeah, at some point it has to. The Cubs, of course, they're seemingly set up for long-term success. Are the Cardinals the biggest threat to the Cubs long-term, or is there another team in better position to contend over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, you look at the Pirates, and if they can keep it going in the small market that they're in, maybe they're the biggest threat. I really don't see it from the Reds or Brewers. Again, one of the things that gets teams to be able to compete is to get a big local TV deal. We saw that what happened with the Diamondbacks. They signed a big local TV deal. What do they use the money for? They went out and signed Zach Greinke when nobody expected that. So
right.
in Pittsburgh or Cincinnati or Milwaukee, any of those markets can get a big local TV deal, then they'll have the money to spend. The Cardinals have just signed a fairly big local TV deal, so they could have the money to continue to compete. The Cubs are hopefully going to have a big TV deal within the next 2 or 3 years if the cable bubble doesn't burst first. If the Cubs get that big money, they should be able to sustain this kind of winning.
So moving on to the Cubs, Lee lives closer to the AA team of the Cubs, so I get to see a lot of their young stars come up through the system. Todd actually lives closer to Miami, so I actually live closer to a major league team than he does at this point. But the Cubs are full of young stars in the field, but the current starting pitching staff is not as young. Does Chicago have enough starting pitching depth this season, or do you see them possibly making a trade for an established starter? And the sub-question to that is, there's a lot of pitching talent on the farm. Are the Cubs just waiting for that to blossom?
Well, you never know, of course, what's going to happen, who's going to become available, whether there'll be injuries or not. The Cubs have stacked some depth, starting depth, in the bullpen, actually. Over the last couple of years, we've seen guys like Eric Jokic and Dallas Buehler come up from Iowa, and those guys are just like, they weren't really very good. But now the Cubs have Travis Wood, Clayton Richard, Trevor Cahill, and Adam Warren, who will all be in the bullpen. All 4 of those guys have had success as starters in the major leagues. So if somebody gets hurt, one of those 4 guys will step in to the rotation. And you have instead of having a AAA starter replace somebody injured, you'll have somebody who does have major league success as a starter. So that's one thing they have piled up is depth in the rotation, and I think they can handle any. Of course, you hope that people don't get hurt, so they can handle any injuries that happen. And it's good to see what happens in midseason. If they feel like there's a guy they can go out and get, and it won't cost too much in terms of prospects, maybe they'll do that.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. It's funny because I wish they just had a better manager who knew how to use the bullpen. I'm joking, of course, obviously. Every team wants to have Joe Madden as their manager, I think, at this point. Chris Bryant fulfilled expectations last year in his rookie season. I mean, did he put up Mike Trout numbers? No, of course not, but he had a great rookie season. What is his ceiling, do you think?
Well, I mean, Chris Bryant's ceiling is to continue what he's been doing, be an all-star every season. I think he just kind of scratched the surface. And one of the things that I really liked about Bryant's rookie year is that he had a real tough time in July. He had a bad month. He was in a slump for a while, and then he made the adjustments, and he had the last 2 months of the year, he was just pounding the ball all over the place. So this is kind of what he did in both AA and AAA. Struggled a little bit at first, then dominated the level, and now he seems to have figured out the major leagues. Now, obviously, other teams' pitchers are going to make adjustments to Chris Bryant. Then it's up to him to keep making these adjustments. I think he's a smart enough player, and he's a very hard worker, and he will do that. You hate to say a guy who's played 1 year in the majors has potential Hall of Fame talent, but maybe he does. I still think long term his future's got to be in the outfield. He's 6'5", and a guy that tall who's at third base on a regular basis, if he's going to be bending down for ground balls all the time, it's going to cause back problems, and you don't want to see that. So, maybe not right away, but maybe in, let's say, 2 to 3 years, if the Cubs can find another good third baseman, then you might think about moving Bryant to the outfield.
I just want to comment, Lee's comment that he lives closer to a major league team than I do. I actually live in the Clevelander Promenade section of Marlins Park, and he's right. He lives closer to a major league team than I do. And
the Cleveland Indians beat the Cubs today, so that at least on a major league field.
True. So finally, we're talking again about Jason Hayward. So how big is the signing of Hayward for the Cubs?
Well, one thing that I've seen from Hayward so far this spring is excellent defense, and that's really his best value is his defense, both in the way he goes after balls, the way he can throw accurately. So he could be considered the best defensive right fielder in baseball, and that has tremendous value. I would like to see him hit for a little bit more power. He's
right.
He did have 1 year where he had 27 home runs for the Braves, so the talent is obviously there to do it. He hasn't done that for the last couple of years. One of those years, he missed some games with injuries. He's still only 26. I'd like to see him, become maybe a 20-homer guy on a consistent basis, and I certainly think he has the talent to do that. If he can do that, then there could be no stopping these guys.
And which young player besides Hayward do you see as having the biggest impact on the Cubs this season?
Well, I'm looking at Addison Russell. Russell had a pretty good year. The year that Russell had in a lot of seasons could have been a Rookie of the Year season. But because of Bryant and guys like Matt Duffy and Noah Syndergaard, there were so many good rookies in the National League last year that Russell didn't even get any votes. But he put up a pretty decent year in 13 home runs, and he was only 21 years old. So here he comes into his age 22 season, a year where a lot of guys at his experience level are still playing in Double-A, and he's already got a full year of major league experience. So I could look for a possible big breakout season for Addison Russell.
And obviously the Cubs are extremely well managed. They've got tons of talent, as we've said. They've got tons of talent in the upper management. Farm system is stocked. Team is obviously really good. We don't want to jinx things, of course. I mean, I totally respect the Cubs. Even though I'm a Cardinals fan, I totally respect the Cubs, so I do not ask to jinx this. What are the chances that they don't win a World Series, say, within the next 5 years? I mean, don't they almost have to?
It's really hard to say. Playoffs are such a crapshoot that anybody can. You get in and you can go very far. Not last year's Royals, but the 2014 Royals showed you how you can sneak in as a wild card and go all the way to Game 7 of the World Series. So it's not just talent. There is a little bit of luck involved, but I think the fact that this team seems primed to be a playoff team, every year for the next 3 to 5 years, you'd think that one of those would end up in a World Series win. And, that's, of course, what every Cub fan has wanted for, many, 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 many years.
And I have to say the Cubs fans absolutely deserve it. I mean, what a show place that place is, and the fans are a big part of that, too. I mean, seriously, it's such a great place to catch games. Al, thanks so much for being on. You've been terrific as always. Where can our millions, our seven listeners, where can you be found on the interwebs?
You can go to bleedcubbieblue.com, of course, the website, and then Twitter is @bleedcubbieblue, and also there's a Bleed Cubbie Blue Facebook page, so check us out.
And that was none other than Al Yellon of bleedcubbieblue.com. I want to thank Al for joining us. and a pre-recorded interview. We are back with the live podcast. Todd, EJ, and Ted are live. I guess Lee is somewhere lurking in the Charleston area.
He's
Probably
lurking
rolling
on the Twitter.
On the Twitter. All right.
Twitter.
We have one pressing question that remains. We've blown through the budget. We're sorry. There's no super PACs around here for us. So
Damn right.
we quickly want to go into our pressing baseball question of the week, and it's, why is Goose Gossage so angry? I guess we'll open it up with Mr. Todd Vandenberg first. Is Goose Gossage so angry, Todd?
Yeah, he's old school.